Oh, Pam, could we talk a little bit about the fact that many gringos and gringas are going out with ticos and, you know,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of gringos come to Costa Rica because there's young, beautiful women here, and they end up marrying a tica, or vice versa. A gringa comes here and she ends up with a tico. Usually, there's quite a large age difference, and that's all well and good. But what happens is and something that ticos need to understand. If a tica falls in love with a gringo, uh, quite frequently the gringo has come here because it's more economical to live, and he's come here to retire for the same reasons that I came here. And so they marry, and there's an age discrepancy there. And so eventually they could be married for 20 years, and then the husband dies. If that man only has Social Security and a little pension, the woman is not entitled to receive any of that. And so she may have been with him for until she's 55 years old, and all of a sudden she has no income at all.
do you know about cases where that happened here?
Yes, absolutely. I know one woman who was married to this man, and he indeed did come here to Costa Rica to live because it was more economical, and he did not have a lot of money. And so when he died, here she was, 55 years old, and that income was cut off. And she was in an age where she was then making jewelry and trying to sell it on the beach. And it was during the rainy season, and then when she would come back, she would be cold, and it was she was too old to be trying to do something like that. It was so not only did she have a loss of her husband, but then she had a loss of income and a loss of a total way of life. And the only way that that can be circumvented is if the couple lives in the United States for 5 years. And a lot of gringos don't even realize that. And if they live in the United States for 5 years and then they come back to Costa Rica, it's no problem, because then the esposa or esposo can draw 50% of whatever that Social Security would be, and sometimes the pension, depending on how that pension was set up. So
How about if there is a will?
if there is a will, the will can take care of assets that the individual would have. Money in the bank, if they own a house, that would cover that kind of stuff. But the income, the Social Security, no. In order to receive any of that Social Security, they have to live in the United States for 5 years.
So would you recommend to just ticas or also ticos? If they married a gringo, they should live there for at least
They
5 years.
have to. They have to live in the United States for 5 years, and that creates a problem in a couple aspects. Number one, sometimes the gringos don't even know it. Number two, the gringos many times have come to the United States because it is more economical to live, and they are retiring, and it's too expensive to live in the United States. So even if they do know it, they might not be able to go back to the United States. And then, of course, you're looking at the problems that you would have to get your spouse into the United States, and residency, and things of that nature. So
Pam, when we talk about that, there's a word that comes to my mind, and I've heard of sugar daddies. Would you mind talking a little bit about that? Like, maybe giving suggestions to ticas who run into a sugar daddy, and like let them know what they want, and
what a
what
sugar
to
daddy
do.
wants.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. I mean, basically, what did you say? Sugar daddy, a sugar daddy, a sugar mama. I mean, they're looking for.
They maintain a woman.
Do they pay for all the expenses?
Well, it depends on the income, but probably probably, certainly, I mean, Ticas are accustomed to men paying all the expenses. Um, uh, so probably with a Tico, with a Tica and a Gringo, yeah, they would pay the expenses.
And my question is, do you see that as something positive, or
I see it as some people. Um some people think that this is very, very wrong. I have been told in my life, Pamela, don't date a tico. Don't date a tico because he's only solamente un oportunista.
you mean they're trying to get
Oh,
your money?
solamente, and it's similar for the ticas. You know, that's all they want. I don't see it quite that way. I see it as sometimes the chicas can never have a life that is where her children are taken care of, or that she has no worries. And I think it's only normal to want to have a life where you have no worries and your children are taken care of. And likewise, Tico, there's some Tico men who are very, very good men.
Yes.
And maybe they have other children, and they have pensions para the children. If they want to have another family, many times they just can't afford it. Not to pay their pension and then to have another family, because they cannot afford it. They do not have the money unless the esposa works. I look at it like, if your primary motivation is to be with that person because you really care about them, it is not wrong to want to have those other things. However, if you are seeking someone only for money, dinero, then I think that's wrong.
And Pam, I have seen many Americans that come down here by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Could we generalize and say that most of them would like a date or live
I
with a
think
tico or tica?
Costa Rica is a country that many people come to for sex, especially in the San Jose area. I have a friend who lives in like apartments in circa Guadalupe, and the men there are going into town for the girls, and they are paying for the girls, and the services rendered for the girls, and they bring the girls back to the apartment, and you know, they cook and they do everything, you know. But so having said that, that's a different scenario than what we were originally talking about. That's for sex only. But I think that people come here for companionship. I think that men do come here, if they're single, they're looking for a chica. And they're looking for, and then we get back to the around and around and around, and you finally get to the top of the mountain to get what you want. They like that personality of the chica, and a little more like Southern women in the United States. You know, there's a difference in the North and the South in the United States.
So, talking about dating, where would you say are the most common or most convenient places to get to know, you know, if it's a tica, to get to know an American, or an American to get to know a tico or a tica? Where do you usually meet or socialize? I have seen like cafeterias, might
In
be.
restaurantes, you know, for men, I don't know, because I'm not a man. I know for me, every place I go, there's men. You know, you just talk. You talk to everybody, you know. And it's very easy. Whoops. I hope that wasn't bird duty. But I think it's very difficult if there's a language barrier and the individual does not learn to speak the language. When I first came here, I dated someone who he would say to me, "Por favor," in español, Pamela, I know this much Espanol, and you know, we just went back and forth on a dictionary. But overall, I think the men, I think, probably come here for the ticas. The women, most of the women are fairly independent and self-sufficient, and they're accustomed to doing things on their own. Every so often you run into a woman who from the United States has always been with a man, and so she will come here and either latch on to another gringo or a tico who is much younger, because she doesn't do anything herself. I mean, she doesn't know how to communicate. She doesn't want to learn the language. She'll just say, okay, I don't need to learn the language because I have you, you know. And so
Pam, thank you so much for